of the Australian countryside and always will be. The tranquility of the bush belies its potential to burn fiercely when conditions are suitable. The Aborigines adapted to this environment and even used fire to make hunting and food gathering easier. But when Europeans came, they brought a different civilization, a civilization vulnerable to devastation by fire. The destruction of human life, buildings, grazing land and fencing caused alarm and fear, and this remains to this day. Most people believe that large bushfires are so intense that buildings in their path have little chance of surviving. But the facts show that buildings do survive severe bushfires, not by chance, but because of good siting and design. The fires of Ash Wednesday, 1983 in Australia, as well as leaving a trail of destruction, gave researchers a new stimulus to study what really happens to buildings in bushfires. The reasons why some buildings survived, whereas others burned down, have been substantially identified. We now know how to build or modify buildings to greatly increase their chances of survival. Bushfires are an inevitable hazard in Australia. This is caused by the combination of our climate and vegetation. The hot, dry summers are aggravated by strong winds blowing from the desert interior of the continent, and our vegetation burns readily, particularly when leaf litter builds up. We can never eliminate all the sources of ignition for bushfires, even if man-made causes were to be eliminated. All bushfires start as a small flame, often kindled by grass and leaf litter. A small fire can spread and grow in three ways: by heat radiation, by flame contact, and by embers. Radiation from the fire heats material nearby until it ignites. Flames make contact and ignite material. Embers from burning grass, leaves and twigs can be blown into unburnt material and are a major means of spread of intense bushfires. Embers can be produced in great quantities and travel long distances in strong winds. Of the many factors which affect the spread of bushfires, fuel is of prime importance. The fuel consists of both growing vegetation and ground litter. The nature of this fuel affects the speed and intensity of the fire, as well as the size of the embers produced. Fires move faster in grass than in any other type of vegetation, and speeds of up to 18 kilometers an hour have been recorded. However, grass fires are short-lived and are of low intensity because the amount of fuel is small. Grass fires produce small embers which do not persist for long. Scrub consists of bushes and small multi-stem trees. If there's enough litter on the ground to preheat the scrub, it will ignite easily, even if the leaves are green. Leaves and twigs will burn quickly and fiercely like grass. If the trunks burn, the fire will be sustained longer and be more intense. Embers from a scrub fire are larger than those from a grass fire. In forests, the trees, scrub, fallen logs and densely compacted litter can sustain intense fires for a long time. The leaf canopy of the trees ignites and spreads fire only when there is enough burning scrub and ground litter under the trees to preheat the canopy. Forest fires can produce brands as well as embers, the brands consisting of large pieces of burning bark and branches which burn for long periods. Besides fuel, there are other factors such as humidity, wind and ground slope which affect the spread of bushfires. The humidity affects the moisture content of fuel and therefore its speed of burning. Wind, as well as carrying the embers and pushing the flames forward, has a major influence on the intensity and direction of spread of a bushfire. The slope of the ground affects the speed of the fire, fires burning faster uphill than down. Bushfires originate in light fuel. They spread by radiation, flame and embers, and their intensity and speed are determined largely by the nature and amount of the fuel present. Bushfires can be large, intense and frightening, but they are not supernatural events. They do not move with the speed of express trains, as some people believe, and their behavior is in accordance with known scientific principles. Their effects on buildings are predictable and can be planned for. Building fires start in the same way as bushfires, with small ignitions. These ignitions progress slowly at first, accelerate, and progressively involve the whole building. Ignition is made easier by the buildup of leaves and other debris before and during a bushfire. This debris accumulates against buildings and posts, in corners, on decks and verandas, on the roof, in gutters, under buildings, in the roof space, and against outbuildings and other combustibles nearby. Just as there are 3 ways a bushfire can spread, there are 3 ways a bushfire can ignite buildings. By embers and burning brands carried by the wind, by heat radiation from the fire, and by direct flame contact. Places where ember ignitions occur on the outside of buildings are vertical timber surfaces at ground level or adjacent to decking, especially if combustibles are left against them, and horizontal timber surfaces, especially if doormats and the like are left on them. Embers can be blown underneath a building and ignite the floor structure and materials stored there. They can also be blown inside through openings such as gaps under doors, windows broken by heat or by wind-blown objects, or through gaps in and around the roof covering. Once embers get inside, they can ignite the contents of rooms and timbers in the roof space. Embers can also ignite a building indirectly by first igniting a nearby outbuilding or other combustibles. And radiation can heat up a building, making ignition by embers easier. In extreme cases, this radiation can ignite timber directly on the exterior, but this only happens when a large quantity of fuel burns close to the building. Ignition of a building by direct flame contact is only likely to occur if hazardous vegetation is growing against or very close to it. A building set in a forest or in an overgrown garden is a good candidate for ignition by flames. The attack of a bushfire on a building goes through 3 stages. The attack begins when embers, blown ahead of the fire front, reach the building and its surroundings. As the fire comes closer, the ember attack increases. This ember attack can last for up to half an hour or more before the fire front itself arrives. During this time, it's important for people staying with their buildings to be active by extinguishing small fires in the surroundings, on the exterior of the building, inside the building, and in concealed spaces in the roof and under the floor. The second stage occurs when the fire arrives. Ember attack, heat radiation, flames and smoke are at their maximum, but this only lasts for 5 to 10 minutes while the fire front passes. During this time, the noise of the wind and the fire can be terrifying, and conditions outside are usually lethal. Everyone should shelter inside, watching for ignitions and putting them out as they occur. After the fire has passed, embers continue to be blown from burning tree trunks, outbuildings, fence posts and wood heaps and the like. This final stage may last for several hours. During this time, people can go outside and put out small fires on and around the building. A check should also be kept inside the building and in concealed spaces in the roof and under the floor. If people who have evacuated before a bushfire return during this period, they can also carry out these firefighting activities. Many buildings are ignited and destroyed during this final stage, and it is often the most important period for building survival. Research indicates that buildings are much more frequently ignited by embers than by radiation and flame contact. It has been found that there are many parts of a building vulnerable to ignition by embers, and the possibility of ignition by embers is present for several hours before, during, and after the passage of the fire. Radiation and flame contact are important only during the few minutes that the fire front takes to pass. The ignition and destruction of buildings by embers is helped by strong winds. The wind drives litter and embers against buildings, underneath and inside them. It carries debris such as branches and sheets of roofing iron which can break windows and skylights, allowing embers to enter. It can also loosen roofing materials, or even lift off the roof, allowing embers to enter. There are many misconceptions about how buildings behave in bushfires. One of these is that buildings explode due to the radiant heat of the bushfire. Researchers have not found any evidence for this, and it's highly unlikely. Another misconception is that bushfires are so severe that it's futile designing buildings to withstand them. Melted metal in the ashes of buildings burned down is taken as evidence for this belief. But it is the severity of the building fire, not the bushfire, that melts the metal. Research has given us an understanding of the ways buildings ignite, and this is the key to preventing their destruction. We should use this knowledge when designing buildings to increase their chances of survival in bushfires. But where do we start? Choosing a suitable site for the building can be highly effective in minimizing bushfire attack. A suitable general location can be selected using fire hazard rating maps, which are available at many local government offices. The fire hazard ratings include factors such as vegetation, ground slope, and access. An individual site can then be selected on its particular merits. Choose a site which is relatively flat, because the flatter the ground, the less severe a fire may be. Choose a site which has the least hazardous vegetation between it and the direction most previous bushfires have come from in that area. Having chosen a site which minimizes bushfire attack, the design of the building and its surroundings comes next. Single concept building designs, such as underground structures, may not be effective because unprotected windows, roof lights and other openings can allow embers to enter. Similarly, rooftop sprinklers deal mainly with embers that lodge on the roof or in the roof gutters. Refuge bunkers separate from the building have been suggested, but there are no proven designs, and their maintenance and safe use are difficult problems to resolve. Cellar refuges under buildings have similar drawbacks, and people sheltering may be trapped if the building burns above them. All of these single concept design solutions tend to give the occupants a false sense of security and should only be used in conjunction with other measures. So-called bushfire-resistant house designs, off-the-rack solutions, are also of limited use. They may not fit different sites, nor accommodate the individual needs and preferences of people. There are a number of measures which can be used together to greatly increase the chances of survival of new and existing buildings. Reduce vegetation, especially those species which drop large amounts of litter. This will minimize embers, radiation and flame attack at their source. However, retain some trees as windbreaks and ember catchers. Erect barriers such as walls, fences, and suitable planting to reduce wind, embers, and radiation. Keep your electric power and telephone lines clear of vegetation, or if possible, put them underground so that these services can be maintained during a bushfire. Similarly, bury plastic water piping. Provide emergency water storage in case the town water supply fails. Simplify the building shape to minimize accumulation of litter and embers on and around the building. Minimize the use of combustible materials, especially for decking, pergolas and posts, to reduce opportunities for ignition of the exterior of the building. Or eliminate these features. Enclose underfloor spaces with non-combustible materials to prevent embers from entering under the building. Or eliminate the spaces altogether by using slab-on-ground construction. Secure the structure and cladding against wind damage by using suitable fixings. Provide shutters, screens, or special glazing materials to protect windows and skylights from breakage and to prevent entry of embers. Seal gaps in walls and roofs to prevent entry of embers into the building and into the roof space. Locate outbuildings well clear of the main building and make sure they're properly designed and protected. If you design a building in this way, you can make it a safer place of refuge in a bushfire and a good alternative to evacuation. A further step can be the upgrading of one room, possibly the laundry, so that children and older people can shelter in it while other occupants are putting out ignitions elsewhere in the building. Even if the building does ignite, the building fire progresses slowly relative to the speed of the fire outside, and the building can be used as a refuge until the fire front has passed. In this program, we have shown how bushfires start building fires, how embers, radiation and flame, aided by the wind, cause ignition and destruction of buildings, that embers are the most important means of ignition, that well-designed buildings have a very good chance of survival, and that such buildings will provide a safer place of refuge for people in bushfires.